The 20s roared with jazz, skyscrapers, and a newfound faith in machines as nations sought to bury the scars of the Great War. In the United States, Prohibition defined the age of speakeasies and gangsters, while in Europe, the lost generation wrestled with disillusion through art and literature. Technology leapt forward, radio-connected homes, aviation conquered the Atlantic, and cinema gave the world its first stars, turning human progress into spectacle. The Harlem Renaissance brought black voices to the cultural forefront, while modernism in art and philosophy challenged every old certainty. Yet as cities rose higher and the music grew louder, the wild grew thinner, displaced by farms, roads, and an economy addicted to endless growth. Even as science advanced, conservation lagged behind, blind to the cost of triumph. Humanity danced in glittering halls, believing the future unstoppable, while extinction accumulated like shadows beneath the neon lights. In the decade that celebrated life's exuberance, the wild was fading, leaving only silence below the triumph of human noise.
The Florida black wolf, a shadowed figure in the history of North American canids, once prowled the tangled forests and wetlands of the southeastern United States. First brought into the naturalist record by William Bartram in 1791 under the name Lupus niger, it carried with it a taxonomy as turbulent as the shifting landscapes it inhabited. Later debates over its classification revealed how thin the boundaries can be between species and subspecies, with the wolf's dark pelt and size setting it apart as a distinct southern offshoot of the red wolf. Unlike its russet kin, this wolf bore a striking black coat, often accented by the pale chest spot seen in females, a detail that lent it a spectral air against the dim understory. Its extinction erased not only a predator but also a fragment of ecological and cultural memory, leaving behind only taxonomic disputes and faint historical echoes. The true phara, once abundant in the deep waters of Lake Geneva, was a benthic whitefish that thrived on zooplankton and spawned in the still, cold months between February and March. Revered for centuries as a staple of local fisheries, its silvery form filled markets and tables alike, to the point that by 1890 it accounted for more than two-thirds of the lake's fish harvest. Yet such abundance proved its undoing. Relentless overfishing combined with the genetic dilution brought by introduced coregonous species steadily erased its lineage. By 1920, the phara had slipped entirely from the waters it had so long defined, leaving only taxonomic debate and the shadow of a name now borrowed by its substitutes. The Great Plains wolf once roamed in vast numbers across the sweeping grasslands from southern Canada to the northern reaches of Texas. Revered and feared in equal measure, it was said by Native American traditions that only 3 of these wolves were needed to fell a full-grown bison, a testament to both their coordination and formidable strength. Morphologically, they were among the larger of North America's wolves, their coats ranging from pale gray to stark black, sometimes gleaming white against the prairies. As the buffalo herds fell to relentless hunting and the frontier expanded, the fate of the wolf became bound to that of its prey, leading to systematic eradication campaigns in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Declared extinct in the wild by 1926, its genetic heritage nevertheless survived quietly in remnant populations discovered decades later in the upper Midwest. Today, both in the wild and through the lineage preserved by Dr. Edward McCleary's efforts, the shadow of Nubilis lingers as a reminder of a vanished prairie world. The red-mustached fruit dove carried a delicate palette of bluish-gray, golden yellow and subtle green that shimmered in the high montane forests it inhabited. Unlike its close relative, the white-capped fruit dove, this species favored loftier elevations, clinging to ridges and canopies above 1,300 meters where fruiting trees sustained its diet. Its juveniles bore a muted version of the adult's plumage, as if nature painted them in gentler tones before granting them the full brilliance of maturity. Yet such beauty proved fragile against the wave of invasive predators. Rats gnawed at eggs, cats hunted the fledglings, and even the great horned owl, alien to these islands, pressed it further toward oblivion. The Norfolk starling, a modest yet striking bird with males shimmering in metallic green against a backdrop of gray, once enlivened the canopies of its namesake island in the Tasman Sea. Measuring only 20 centimeters, it was small but distinctive, its orange-red eyes catching the light as it foraged among branches. Endemic to Norfolk Island, it became increasingly pressured as agriculture stripped away forest habitat and newly introduced European starlings, thrushes, and blackbirds claimed the same ecological niches. Unlike its close relative from Lord Howe, rats were not the culprits in its demise, for they arrived too late to play a role. Instead, by 1923, a quiet disappearance had settled over the island, marking the loss of a bird whose presence is now remembered only through paintings and preserved skins. The Lyson honeycreeper, cloaked in scarlet vermilion with golden tints on its breast, was once a vivid spark of life on its remote Pacific island home. Endemic to tiny Lyson, it fed with delicate precision on nectar and insects, walking flower to flower like a hummingbird bound to the ground, its sweet, understated song carrying across the lagoon plain. Early naturalists already found it uncommon, and as rabbits devastated the island's vegetation after their introduction in 1903, the honeycreeper's specialized foraging grounds collapsed into sand and ruin. By 1923, only 3 individuals remained, recorded by the Tanager expedition as they clung to survival in the barren landscape, their persistence both haunting and heroic. A storm soon swept them away, their last fragile refuge erased, leaving Dickey's brief film of a singing male as a poignant farewell. Thus ended a bird that was among the most specialized nectar feeders of Hawaii, extinguished not by predation but by ecological upheaval wrought by human negligence. Known in Cuba as the Nazareno, Monteverdia lineata was a western Cuban member of the Celastraceae, long treated as Matinus lineata before being recombined into Monteverdia in 2017. Botanists documented shrubs up to about 4 meters tall, flowering in July and fruiting in October in sites around Pinar del Rio, with reports linking the species to mangrove ectones. Across the 20th century, the lowland habitats it occupied were steadily transformed and degraded by agriculture and livestock, erasing the thickets and edges where it lingered. The round comb's hell, once confined to the flowing waters of the Tennessee and Ohio River drainages, belonged to a lineage of freshwater mussels whose survival was tied to the subtle balance of clean, oxygen-rich streams. Its shell, finely rayed and pearly, was the quiet architecture of a species that filtered water and anchored itself into the shifting riverbeds. Yet such delicacy could not withstand the upheaval brought by industrialization, sedimentation, pollution, and altered currents stripped away the conditions on which it depended. By 1924, the rivers had fallen silent of its presence, and today it endures only as an emblem of how swiftly human change can unravel the intricacies of aquatic life. The Lord Howe fantail, with its soft cinnamon underparts and pale throat, was a delicate offshoot of the New Zealand fantail, uniquely adapted to its subtropical island home. Endemic to Lord Howe, it flitted through rainforests yet showed little fear of humans, often following them into houses in its restless search for insects. Its nests, bound with cobwebs and cradling clutches of 2 or 3 eggs, bore witness to a fragile cycle of life balanced within the island's narrow bounds. That balance was shattered in 1918, when black rats arrived with the wreck of the SS Macombo, turning the fantail's tameness into fatal vulnerability. By the mid-20s it had vanished entirely, another small, trusting bird undone by an invasive predator it had no defenses against. The California grizzly, remembered today as a symbol of strength emblazoned on the state's flag, was once a living presence across nearly all of California's valleys, mountains, and coasts. Early Spanish missionaries and rancheros wrote of immense, terrifying beasts, with accounts of individuals exceeding 500 kilograms, though later measurements suggest they were comparable in size to other North American grizzlies, despite the legends. Their coats varied from dark brown to a golden sheen that earned them the name California golden bear, while their diet ranged from grasses and acorns to salmon, deer, and, eventually, the cattle brought by settlers. As livestock spread, the bears grew ever more entangled in conflict with humans, celebrated in cruel blood sports, hunted for their hides and meat, and poisoned by ranchers seeking to defend their herds. Vast numbers were slaughtered in the 19th century, with hunters such as Absalom, Rocky, Beasley and Seth Kinman claiming dozens to hundreds of kills each. By the early 20th century, only a handful survived, including the elusive Two Toes of Madera County, who evaded capture for years despite his maimed paw. The last confirmed killing occurred in 1922, and by 1924 the grizzly had vanished entirely from California's wilds. In less than a century, human expansion and exploitation extinguished a creature that had roamed the state for millennia, leaving behind an emblem in place of a living animal. The bugle hartebeest, pale sand-colored with sweeping U-shaped horns, once roamed in vast herds across North Africa from Morocco to Egypt, its presence etched in both landscapes and ancient memory. Egyptian tombs, hieroglyphs and Roman mosaics alike record its image, suggesting that this antelope was not only hunted but also symbolically significant, perhaps even sacrificed or semi-domesticated in antiquity. Luis del Marmol Carvajal wrote in 1573 of gatherings 100 strong in Morocco, their vigilance tested by the stalking Barbary lion. By the 90th century, however, colonial conquest transformed the species' fate. French military expeditions slaughtered entire herds, accelerating a collapse already hastened by habitat loss and hunting. Step by step, the bugle retreated into the Atlas Mountains, vanishing from Tunisia by 1902 and dwindling to a handful of survivors in Morocco by 1917. The last known wild individual was shot near Missour in 1925, extinguishing a lineage that had endured since the time of pharaohs. A few captives survived briefly in European menageries, but by the 20s they too were gone, leaving only skins, skulls, and scattered art to testify to their former vitality. Its story is one of continuity broken, an animal revered in ancient civilizations, erased in modern times through the relentless expansion of human dominion. Anthony's woodrat, once confined to the small and windswept Isla Todos Santos off Baja California, carved out its life among the sparse vegetation of the island's flats. Unlike some of its congeners, it was almost entirely herbivorous, sustained by the modest plant communities that clung to the rocky soils of the Land Bridge Islands. Its isolation, which had preserved its distinct form for millennia, also rendered it acutely vulnerable when feral cats were introduced, turning its refuge into a trap. By the mid-20th century, the species had vanished, remembered only as a fragment of Mexico's island biota extinguished by a predator it had never evolved to withstand. The thick-billed ground dove, known only from two specimens collected in 1882 and 1927, remains one of the most enigmatic birds of the Solomon Islands. With its chestnut upperparts shimmering faintly purple against a chocolate belly and pale beige throat, it was a modestly sized dove that lived close to the forest floor, where vulnerability was written into its habits. Introduced predators coupled with lowland logging and hunting pressure ensured that this ground dweller had little refuge as human activity spread across Makira and nearby islets. By the mid-20th century it had silently vanished, its absence confirmed only decades later, leaving its faded skins in museums as the last traces of a bird erased before it could ever be fully known. The Caucasian bison, once a formidable presence in the rugged slopes of the western Caucasus, was a mountain-adapted form of the European wisent. Compared to its lowland relatives, it bore thicker horns, sturdier shoulders, shorter rounded hooves and a less shaggy coat, a body built for navigating steep forests and resisting predators like Caspian tigers and Asiatic lions. For centuries it roamed widely, but by the 70th century, human expansion into the mountains began to shrink its territory, and relentless hunting drove its numbers into steep decline. From an estimated 2,000 individuals in the 1860 years, it dwindled to just 50 by 1921, and in 1927 the last 3 known survivors were killed, ending the subspecies in the wild. A single bull had been taken into captivity in Germany in 1908 and lived until 1925, becoming the sole genetic bridge to his lost kin. Through his hybrid offspring with lowland cows, he left a trace of his lineage that endures today in the so-called lowland Caucasian line of modern European bison. Thus, though the Caucasian form is gone, fragments of its blood still course through the herds that now repopulate Europe, a ghostly reminder of what was lost. The Snake River sucker is known from a single female taken below Jackson Lake Dam on October 13, 1927 by Ollis J. Murray, a lone clue to a fish that likely inhabited Jackson Lake and other upper Snake River waters. As with its congeners, it was a lacustrine planktivore, equipped with numerous dendritic gill rakers for filtering zooplankton in still, deep water. By the time that holotype was collected, its lineage may already have been genetically swamped by introgression with the Utah sucker, a process accelerated when early 20th century dams at Jackson Lake blocked migrations and concentrated spawning below their tailwaters. The Syrian wild ass, standing scarcely a meter at the shoulder, was the smallest of all equines, yet its speed and untamable nature earned it comparisons to a thoroughbred. Its coat shifted with the seasons, glowing tawny olive in summer before fading to a pale sandy yellow in winter, a camouflage for the deserts and steppes it roamed across Syria, Mesopotamia, and the Levant. For millennia, humans pursued and revered it. Bones appear at Göbekli Tepe, cuneiform tablets describe its hunting, and hybrid kungas bred from these asses and donkeys became prized draft animals of Mesopotamian elites. Xenophon marveled at their ability to outrun horses, dashing just far enough ahead to tease their pursuers, while ancient texts across the Bible and Quran use the image of the wild ass as a symbol of fierce independence. Yet this independence had limits. Like gazelles and ostriches, they fell to Assyrian hunters' lassos, and later to rifles in the age of European exploration. By the 80th and 90th centuries, their herds, once vast, had shrunk to scattered remnants under relentless overhunting and political turmoil. Even the London Zoo's attempts to preserve the lineage through hybrids in the late 19th century could not alter the decline. The last wild individual was shot near the Azraq Oasis in Jordan in 1927, the same year the last captive animal perished in Vienna, ending a lineage that had survived since antiquity. Today, the Syrian wild ass remains a ghostly presence in texts, mosaics and ancient graves, an emblem of both endurance and irrevocable loss. The Hawaiian yellowwood, known locally as holei, was a tree once rooted in the volcanic soils of Hawaii Island, where it grew only in the upland forests of Puawawa and Kipukaupaulu. Belonging to the dogbane family, it bore the pale blossoms and dense wood typical of its genus, traits that tied it to the larger ecological fabric of the island's dry forests. Yet its range was perilously narrow, and as grazing, logging, and invasive species reshaped those landscapes through the early 20th century, its stands dwindled beyond recovery. Last seen in 1927, the species now survives only in name, a reminder of how fragile and irreplaceable Hawaii's botanical heritage can be. Cry pansy, a delicate violet rising no more than 12 centimeters above the limestone soils of northern France, unfurled its light purple petals in May and June, each bloom carried on a glabrous stem with finely cut stipules. First recognized in 1878 by François-Xavier Gillet from plants near the village of Cry, it was already a botanical rarity, confined to tiny calcareous outcrops in Yann. Like its kin, its flowers were zygomorphic, but the spur, slender and slightly longer than the calyx, gave it a distinctive grace that appealed to horticulturists who briefly maintained it in cultivation. Its extreme specialization, however, left it fatally vulnerable. The fragile populations disappeared under the combined pressure of habitat disturbance and overcollection. By 1930, the last wild plants had withered from the limestone ridges, leaving Viola cryana a ghost of France's floral heritage, preserved only in herbaria and historical texts. The Utah lake sculpin, a small bottom-dwelling fish, once threaded its way along the sediments of Utah Lake, feeding on invertebrates hidden in the mud. Endemic to that single body of water, it was part of a fragile lacustrine ecosystem where even slight environmental shifts carried disproportionate consequences. A combination of severe drought in the 30s, a bitter winter that froze the shallows, and declining water quality from agricultural runoff compressed its habitat until survival was no longer possible. The last specimen was collected in 1928, and within a few short years the species had vanished, leaving only its Bear Lake cousin to carry the lineage forward. The Lord Howe gerygone, a delicate songbird no longer than 12 centimeters, once gleamed with soft grays, browns, and a wash of yellow across its breast and belly, its pink eyes giving it an almost spectral presence in the canopy. Endemic to Lord Howe Island, it lived high among the forest foliage, where its fine bill plucked insects and spiders from bark and leaves, especially in the wake of rainfall when prey was abundant. Its domed nests, suspended from twigs and bound with spider silk, sheltered clutches of speckled eggs, fragile cradles easily plundered once black rats arrived with the SS Macombo in 1918. By 1928, the gerygone had vanished, undone by predators and likely disease, its once common song now absent from the island's forests. The Ethiopian amphibious rat, known from a single specimen collected in 1928 along the banks of the Blue Nile, is one of the most elusive mammals ever described. Its dense, water-repellent fur, long tail fringed with stiff hairs and partially webbed feet suggest a life bound to streams, where it likely hunted aquatic insects and other small prey. Endemic to the highlands of Ethiopia, it occupied a fragile niche already under pressure from deforestation, agriculture, and the disturbance of waterways. No further sightings have been made since its discovery, and it is presumed extinct, a species extinguished almost as soon as it was brought to scientific attention. What remains is a single skin and skull, silent witnesses to a vanished rodent uniquely adapted to Africa's highland rivers. The paradise parrot, dazzling even among parrots with its blaze of turquoise, scarlet, and gold, once lit up the grassy woodlands straddling the Queensland, New South Wales border. Unlike most of its kin, it lived largely on the ground, swift in flight but nesting low in termite mounds, where pairs returned year after year to raise their broods. Its fate was bound to the fragile ecology of grasslands, and when drought, overgrazing, and altered fire regimes stripped away seed sources, its numbers fell precipitously. By the early 20th century, it had already grown rare, vanishing finally in 1927 despite repeated searches. Today, it stands as the only Australian parrot driven to extinction, a lost jewel of color and sound from the continent's open country. Eastwood's long-tailed seps, a slender, almost serpentine lizard with tiny limbs ending in just a few toes, once slipped quietly through the high-altitude grasslands of South Africa. Known only from 2 specimens collected near Hennertsburg in 1911, it was already rare when its type locality was soon transformed by vast plantations of eucalyptus and pine. This conversion erased the open grasslands on which it depended, leaving no refuge for a species so narrowly specialized. Despite later searches, no trace was ever found again, and so the lizard named for Miss Eastwood survives only in memory and museum jars, its habitat long since lost to the plow and timber axe. The Guadalupe miva, once widespread across the archipelago from La Désirée to Marie Galante, had by the 20th century retreated to the tiny refuge of Guadeloupe. A ground-dwelling lizard of the Teiidae family, it foraged opportunistically on vegetation and carrion, even scavenging its own kind in the struggle for survival on that narrow scrap of land. Its final blow came not from predation or hunting but from nature itself. In September 1928, a catastrophic hurricane swept the Lesser Antilles, striking Guadeloupe with winds exceeding 240 km/h and surging seas that erased islets and flattened vegetation. The island was devastated beyond recovery, and with it the last amebas vanished. Thus a species known since the first European explorers was lost, its end sealed by a storm that reshaped the Caribbean's natural history alike. The Nullarbor barred bandicoot, sometimes called the butterfly bandicoot for the dark, wing-shaped patch on its rump, was once a small, nocturnal inhabitant of the arid limestone plains of southern Australia. Adapted to the harsh expanses of the Nullarbor, it foraged for insects, seeds, and roots, its delicate presence woven into a landscape that seemed inhospitable to most life. Known only from museum skins and bones, it was not formally described until 2018, long after its disappearance had silenced its role in the desert's ecology. The last specimen was collected in 1928, just as introduced predators such as cats and foxes were spreading across the continent. Rabbits and livestock compounded the damage, stripping vegetation and altering the fragile soils on which the bandicoot depended. Fire, too, shifted from traditional indigenous regimes to destructive patterns, removing refuges that once sheltered small mammals. In this convergence of pressures, the butterfly-marked bandicoot faded from existence, leaving only its name and preserved remains as evidence of its brief story. Acalypha wilderi, a modest shrub of the spurge family rarely rising above 2 meters, once occupied the shaded forest slopes of Rarotonga between 200 and 300 meters. Known only from a handful of collections before 1929, it lingered in habitats that were steadily carved into fields, roads, and plantations, while invasive species pressed in from the edges. Its precise distinctions from related Polynesian species remain debated, but its disappearance was unequivocal, formally acknowledged with extinction status in 2014. In the end, it slipped away almost unrecorded, erased by human reshaping of the very hillsides where it had quietly endured. The streak-kit's bullfinch was a glossy, large-billed songbird once confined to the forests of Mount Liamwiga. Endemic to St. Kitts, it likely ranged more widely in the past, but by the late 19th century it was already cornered into upland refuges, its survival increasingly precarious. Hurricanes at the turn of the century, compounded by centuries of lowland deforestation and competition with the resilient Lesser Antillean bullfinch, seem to have pushed it to the brink. A single overlooked specimen collected in 1929 stands as its last trace, leaving open the faint possibility that a few survivors still linger in the island's forests. The Makira moorhen, a shy forest rail of the Solomon Islands, was said to be blue-gray with a vivid red bill and legs, slipping through the leaf-dark understory of Makira. Ernst Mayr secured the only specimen in December 1929, an encounter so startling he nearly fainted, and apart from an unconfirmed 1953 report, no one has documented the bird since. Like many island rails, it was likely undone by introduced predators such as cats and rats, with habitat alteration amplifying the peril for a ground-dwelling, possibly weak-flying species. 21st century searches have drawn blanks, and the moorhen now lingers in the literature as critically endangered, quite possibly gone, its presence preserved only in a single skin and in the memory of a breathless field note from 1929. A sedge of the nutrush clan, Scleria chevalieri, took root in the low, freshwater, Niayes swales of coastal western Senegal, its last confirmed trace a November 17, 1929 collection along the Dakar-Rufisque Road. Confined to these interdunal wetlands, it lived where the water table brushed the surface and seasonal flooding sustained a belt of swamp vegetation unique to the coast. As the 20th century advanced, many Niayes were drained and converted to irrigated market gardens, erasing the precise habitat from which the species had been known. No plant has been seen since that 1929 record, and the taxon is now assessed as extinct, a name left to herbaria and footnotes where living marsh once stood.